intro for this video. I was gonna do some little clever thing and I was sitting here for a good solid minute and nothing came to mind. So I guess my intro is going to be about how I don't have an intro. Hello everyone, it is Samantha and I hope you guys are having a great day today. Today is the 2nd of April, it is a brand new month and that can only mean one thing. Yes, it is wrap-up time. I had in the month of March one of the best reading months I have had in over a year. I read 7 books. And at the time of filming, which is on the 31st of March, I might actually be able to finish a book today, we'll see. But I definitely have had a very solid reading month and I'm very happy about it because I've actually enjoyed most of the books that I read. As always, I like to start out my reading wrap-ups with some statistics, so let us just get into those numbers. In the month of March, I ended up reading a total of 2,919 pages, which averages to about 94 pages a day, and about 417 pages a book. In terms of genre, pretty much every single book I read this month was fantasy. I read one science fiction book, but pretty much everything else was fantasy. In terms of format, 57% of the books that I read were in the format of trade paperback, and the remainder were all hardcover. In terms of book length, 14% of the books that I read were between 500 and 600 pages, 42% were between 400 and 500 pages, and another 42% were between 300 and 400 pages. In terms of book status, so where I acquired the books that I read, 57% were books that I purchased myself, 28% of the books that I read were library books, and then the remainder were ARCs from publishers. In terms of star ratings, I had a very solid reading month. 43% of the books that I read were 5 stars, 28% were 4 stars, 14% were 3 stars, and the remainder 14% were 2 stars. So that is enough for all of the statistics, and now we're going to get into the books and all of my thoughts on them. The first book that I finished in the month of March was City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I love this book. It was so good. It follows our main protagonist of Nari, who's about a 20-year-old orphan living in the streets of Cairo in the 18th century, and she's very crafty, a little bit of a con artist, and she accidentally ends up summoning a Jinn warrior, and she soon discovers that she's actually a member of a lost family of Jinn. And he ends up taking her to the Lost City where all of her relatives and people like her live. And she basically has to kind of immerse herself not only into an entirely new world, but she also ends up getting thrust into a bunch of court politics that are occurring in this city. So I really ended up enjoying this book. It was very vivid. I just loved how vivid this book was. I just loved everything about it. I haven't read a lot of books that take place in the Middle East, particularly a fantasy book, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It was an own voices book told from an author who is herself Muslim, and it featured Muslim characters, and I just really found myself enjoying it. Everything just felt very rich and it was like new and fresh. This book was just everything that I needed at the time, so it was definitely a solid 4-star read for me. I gave the plot 4.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the characters 4 out of 5 stars. I gave the world building 4 out of 5 stars. For an overall rating of about 4.5 out of 5 stars. One of my only complaints about this was kind of the insta-love between Nari and the Jinn warrior that she summons. I just was not super convinced with that romance, and I don't know why whenever the main character is female, they always have to make a love interest occur for her. But I did like how very solid Nari was. She was like not gonna put up with anybody's crap, and she was like, I'm gonna do my own thing, and if y'all can't like go along with that, then I'm done with you. And I just loved her character. She was very strong-willed, independent, and I was here for this. The next book that I finished in the month of March was Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames. This is a book that follows a band of mercenaries that basically get back together again after about 20 or so years because they need to go and save their band leader's daughter from a city under siege by all of the creatures of the wild. I really enjoyed this book. It was full of a lot of humor. It was a lot of fun. This is one of the debut authors in the BookTube SFF Awards, and he has definitely hooked me. I cannot wait to read more books from him. I know his next book in the series is coming out this year, and I cannot wait to read it. But I just loved everything about it. It was very humorous. It was a little bit slow in the middle. I would say that the pacing could have been better. That was probably my biggest complaint with this book, but I really enjoyed the characters. I liked the story. I liked the humor, and I just felt like it all kind of worked very well together. Plus, I enjoy reading fantasy books where that features characters that are older, because I feel like typically when you read a fantasy book, the characters are like, you know, anywhere from 15 to 20. So it's kind of nice seeing these characters who are like in their 40s and 50s. So I ended up rating this book 4 out of 5 stars. I would give the plot 4 out of 5 stars, the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars, the characters 4.5 out of 5 stars, the world building 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would have liked a little bit more world building and context for this world, like just kind of the history of everything and the peoples that live there in the various kingdoms. You got a little bit of it, but I definitely would have preferred a little bit more. For an overall rating of 4 out of 5 stars. Again, as I said, my biggest this issue was both the world building and the pacing. I think both of those things could have been improved upon, and I kind of expect both of those things to get better as he writes more and more books. The next book that I finished in March was The Tangled Lands by Paolo Bacigalupi and Tobias Buckle. This is an arc that I received from the publisher in exchange for my free and honest review, which is what you're going to get today. So this book is a little bit interesting because it actually features 4 different stories, 2 written by each of the authors, and they all take place in this land that has basically been ruined by magic. So the use of magic in this world causes this thing called the bramble to grow, and it basically chokes everything. And if you get pricked by the bramble, then you basically die. You fall into a deep, deep sleep that you never wake up from. So this book has 4 different stories that are set in this land, and it follows a variety of different characters. They're all separate stories, and the characters are not connected to each other in any way. So it's almost like a short story collection. Overall, I thought the concept of the story was really interesting, but I kind of left a little bit to be desired for me. I was expecting a little bit more from this story. It really didn't quite capture my attention like I was hoping it would. It was definitely a fast read. I think I read this in like 2 days, but I wasn't super invested in any of the stories, and I would have liked a lot more context for this world, because we are seeing this world after it's basically been decimated by magic, but we don't know any history. Like, how do they get to this point? They allude to like these cities that used to exist and the people that used to live in them that are kind of becoming long forgotten, but we don't get much more than that. And I would have liked to have a little bit more context and a history that I think would have added a little bit more richness to the story that it was lacking. Also, in terms of the 2 authors, I have to say I actually preferred the stories by Tobias Buckle. His story, The Executionress, because she's a female executioner, was actually my favorite in this collection. So I definitely preferred his story and the way that he kind of portrayed his characters a little bit more than Paolo Bacigalupi. So overall, I ended up rating this book 3 out of 5 stars. It was not as exciting as I was hoping it would be. Premise for the book definitely sounds a lot more exciting than the actual execution of this book. So as I said, I ended up rating it 3 out of 5 stars. I would give the writing 3 out of 5 stars. I would give the world building 2 out of 5 stars. I would give the plot of the stories 3 out of 5 stars, and the characters portrayed in these stories 3 out of 5 stars, for an overall rating of 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished, and it was a library book, so I no longer have it, was The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is probably one of my favorite books that I read this month. This is a middle grade novel. It's also in the BookTube SFF Awards, and guys, I loved it. I loved it as a 30-year-old adult, and I can tell you right now, if I would have read this when I was like 11, I would have been obsessed. Like, I cannot wait for more books to come out in this series. The story follows our main character of Morrigan Crow, and she is what they call a cursed child in this world. So basically every single bad thing that happens, everybody blames on her, and her father has to like pay retributions to people, and basically everybody hates her. And the other thing about cursed children is that they die on their 11th birthday. So her birthday is fast approaching, and she knows she's gonna die, and she's not very happy about it. Her own family basically hates her, and she's just basically all around miserable. Until the mysterious man Jupiter whisks her away to kind of like a parallel world called the Land of Nevermore, where she discovers that she's not only not cursed, but there's a whole world of people who are there to love her. And then Jupiter ends up having her compete to enter the Wondrous Society, this prestigious school and organization that Jupiter himself comes from. So this story was just a lot of fun. I loved the main character of Morrigan. She was really like sweet and funny without being annoying, because sometimes I have a hard time with middle grade because the main characters I find to be kind of annoying, but she was not, and I just loved everything about this book. It was very whimsical and magical and vivid and rich, and I enjoyed it immensely. So I ended up rating this book 5 out of 5 stars. I gave the writing 5 out of 5 stars. I gave the characters 5 out of 5 stars. I gave the world building 4 out of 5 stars. I would have liked a little bit more like context for this world and kind of like how things got to the way they were. And I gave the overall plot 5 out of 5 stars for an overall rating of 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely a very solid book and one that I enjoyed a lot. The next book that I read was also a library book and also for the BookTube SFF Awards in the science fiction category, and it was my least favorite book of the year and the month. And that book was Borne by Jeff Vandermeer. This was my first Jeff Vandermeer book. I have had Annihilation on my shelf for years. I haven't read it. At this point, I probably won't because I've discovered I hate his writing. The story follows our main protagonist of Rachel. Rachel is a scavenger in this like post-apocalyptic destroyed city that is basically being tormented by a ginormous bear that used to be a person but was genetically modified, and now he's like a 80-foot tall bear, as well as this woman called the Magician, who is also terrorizing everybody. But one day on her scavenging, she discovers this strange plant-like creature that she ends up calling Borne, and so the story basically follows her discovery of what exactly Borne is, as well as Borne kind of discovering what exactly he is. And I thought this story was going to be a lot more fun and exciting and endearing than it was. I ended up hating this book. I just did not enjoy reading it. I read it on my vacation, so I was actually able to get it done and read in 2 days, which was great because I wanted it out of my life. I know I'm sounding like ridiculous, but I really did not enjoy this book. I already have a hard time with like dystopian novels, especially ones where the future seems kind of plausible because it just kind of makes me anxious, and this one definitely kind of had that feel to it. So that was one reason why I didn't much care for it, which I recognize is a personal thing, but in terms of his writing, I didn't much care for the book at all. Actually, the only character I liked in this book was the character of Borne, and we did not have enough Borne. This book did not have enough Borne. I thought this book would be more told from his perspective, maybe. No, not at all. We got it from Rachel's perspective, who I hated because she was just annoying. I don't know. I just found her character to be exasperating, I guess is a word that I would say. So it was definitely just not the book for me. Judging from people's reviews I have seen for Jeff Vandermeer's books, he seems to be one of those polarizing authors that people either absolutely love or they hate, and I apparently fell into the hate category. So overall, I ended up rating this book 2 out of 5 stars. Main reason why I didn't give it 1 star is because I did like the character of Borne, and I felt like the idea of Borne and what he was really a strong concept. So that was like pretty much the only aspect of this book that I enjoyed. So I gave the writing 1.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the characters 2 out of 5 stars. I gave the plot 2 out of 5 stars. I gave the world building like 1 star. I just, I feel so harsh, but I did not enjoy this book, so yeah, hard pass. Next book that I completed made up for that because it was my other 5-star book from this month, and that was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This book, guys, is so good. This is another BookTube SFF Award book in the debut, and I think is also in the fantasy category. And I see why people nominated it. It was pretty dang good. It follows our main character, Vasilisa, who is the youngest of, I believe it was 5 siblings, growing up in, I think it's like 14th century Russia, which was a really, really interesting setting because I read almost no books that take place in Russia, plus just the time period is of course a time period that I enjoy, and it was just kind of interesting having real historical events kind of woven into the story. So this book features Vasilisa, who has the ability to basically see fae creatures. So there's a lot of creatures based upon Russian mythology and folklore, and she has the ability to see these creatures and communicate with them. So when Vasilisa was born, her mother died shortly thereafter, and it isn't until about the age of 7 years old that her father ends up going to Moscow to find himself a wife. His deceased wife was actually the sister of the current king residing over Moscow. He ends up going to his court and trying to find a new wife, and he ends up bringing her home. She is deeply religious, and she also has the ability to see these creatures, but she sees them as demons. So she basically starts to set about making sure that the people in the village where Vasilisa is being raised don't leave the offerings to these creatures. These creatures are all kind of magical, and they serve the purpose with these offerings and people believing in them to kind of protect the valley and keep the crops growing and keep their homes safe, etc. So also in the woods that border this village is where the Winter King resides, as well as his evil one-eyed brother, the Bear. And while people's beliefs start to wane, the Bear ends up is able to grow into power and soon becomes loose, and it's up to Vasilisa to kind of stop that. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I love Catherine Arden's writing. It was very rich and vivid, and I just felt very whimsical and magical, and I was just so immersed in the story. I read it in like a day and a half, and I have not read a book that fast in so long, guys, like so long. I also really, really loved the main character, Vasilisa. She was strong-willed. She wanted to live the life that she wanted to live. Like, she wanted to do all the things that she wanted to do, no matter if it was proper or not for a girl to do, and she kind of like fought to be able to continue to do that, and she kind of fought for what she believed in. I just love how strong-willed she was and how much faith she had. Like, she was definitely just a fantastic character that I fell in love with. So as I said, I ended up rating this book 5 out of 5 stars. I gave the world building 5 out of 5 stars, the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars, the characters 5 out of 5 stars, and the plot itself 5 out of 5 stars, for an overall rating of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book so much that I actually went and got book 2 yesterday, and I'm hoping to start it this weekend. And the final book that I ended up finishing in March was one that I actually did start in February, but I was at the end of the month and I didn't finish it, and that was Plague of Swords by Miles Cameron. This is the 4th book in the Traitor Sun cycle. I don't want to give too much of the plot away because at this point it's almost the end of the series and I'm gonna spoil you guys because a lot has happened by this point, but suffice it to say I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than the 3rd book, and I cannot wait to read the 5th book. So I may actually be reading that one next month because I need to know what's going to happen. So this one was a lot of fun. It's probably my 2nd favorite in the series so far, and I'm just enjoying the character progression and the growth of all the main characters we have followed. So I ended up rating this book 5 out of 5 stars. I gave the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars, the characters 5 out of 5 stars, the plot 5 out of 5 stars, and the world building 4.5 out of 5 stars for an overall rating of 5 stars. Definitely looking forward to finishing out the series, but I will also be very sad. So finally, I do have 2 books that I have not finished yet. This is the 31st of March, and I might be able to finish one, but I'm not quite sure I'll be able to make it. But I'm definitely a good chunk of the way into both of these books, so of course I want to mention them. The first book is Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hambly. This is a book that Thomas from SFF 180 sent to me for my birthday, and I'm enjoying it a lot. It's like great 80s fantasy, and I love it. This book is about the young man Gareth who ends up going to the far northern lands to find one of the last Dragon's Bane in this world, because they have a dragon that needs killing and he's like one of the only ones left that has actually successfully killed the dragon. So he travels to the Winterlands to pick up John, his partner Jenny, and to bring them back to the capital kingdom so that they can basically kill the dragon. So that's about the point that I'm at right now. They're on their way back to the city where Gareth is from, and so far it's getting pretty exciting. I'm really enjoying this book so far. It did start out a little bit slow, but it's definitely picked up, and now I'm like super invested in the story and what's going to happen. Plus dragons, like, need I say more? And the next book that I have started, but I know I won't finish until next month, is The Table of Less Valued Knights by Marie Phillips. A lovely person recommended this to me on my humorous fantasy recommendations video, and I'm so glad they did, and I had to get it right away because it's 2 of my favorite things, and that is humor and Arthurian legends. So this book takes place in Camelot, and it follows all of the less valued knights that basically Arthur makes sit at a rickety square table because that's just where he sends all of the people he doesn't want to see or deal with anymore. And so they're stuck at this table and they can't go on quests, and they have to basically get all the leftover food, and it basically sucks to be a knight at the table of less valued knights. But on the day of Pentecost, a quest falls into the lap of our main character of Humphrey. And he decides to take it, even though he's not supposed to, and he's going to help this young woman to find her kidnapped fiancé. So I'm about 103 pages into it, and I have to say I'm really enjoying it. It's full of a lot of humor, it's full of a lot of like King Arthur references, which of course I love because I love King Arthur stories. And I don't know, I just love the humor. It's like full of a lot of sarcasm, and I love it, and I'm here for this. So this is one that I'm definitely being entertained by and cannot wait to finish. Alright guys, those are all of the books that I finished in the month of March. As you can see, I read a lot of books, and all of them are pretty decent for the most part, so it was a pretty solid reading month for me. You'll have to let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts are, or anything else you want to throw down in the comments. Please feel free to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Until next time, happy reading. Bye!